Tim Pool. Remember, Tim Pool will not now have me on because of that horrible thing I did when Ethan Klein invited me on to essentially crash the debate that Steven Crowder wanted to have with Ethan Klein. That horrific act,
unforgivable,
of public insolence,
cowardly, he said,
a cowardly act to come on that way onto the stream. Like,
now that's what you did, was you were cowardly, not the guy that hung up and ran away from the debate.
I was cowardly
to confront him in that way.
That was too offensive for Tim Pool to have a debate with me. And let's be clear too, he invited me during the height of the pandemic to come into his studio, and I said,
I'll do it remotely.
Well, no. He first said, like, come on my show. I'm like, sure, anytime. And then he says, okay, we'll have you fly you down or train you down to the studio. I'm like, well, I'm not coming into the studio because I had already done a Zoom interview with him in the past. I don't know if it was Zoom, it may have been Skype or whatever. I had done it. It's online. You can see it. He sort of buried it in his channel because it didn't go exactly as he had hoped. But nevertheless, that's my assumption. Then he said, I can't do it. And I said, well, I can't go down there. First of all, I have kids. I do a daily show. And also, like, I don't even know what your vax status is because you guys don't believe in it. And he's like, the pandemic's over. That was right before the huge surge that we had in the winter of, I think, 2021. Anyways, and then subsequent, I've said, I'll come on. But he wouldn't do it because it was so offensive to him what I did to Steven Crowder. Anyways, here is him inviting avowed white nationalist, misogynist, anti-Semite Nick Fuentes into the studio with Milo Yiannopoulos, avowed white nationalist, I think, right? I mean, I can't remember what.
I'd have to search on this.
Yiannopoulos is also, I guess, former gay conversion.
Yeah, he's ex-gay.
Nick Fuentes claims that he's asexual. I am a little suspicious about that claim based upon information that we have, but that's not what this video is about. That'll be for a different time. But, and then also Kanye West, who has been in, I don't know if you've seen this in the news lately, but he has been a little controversial because he's got a problem with the Jews.
He's going DEFCON 3 on the Jews.
Yes, DEFCON 3 on the Jews.
DEFCON 3.
DEFCON 3. And, and
please.
Here he is. So Tim Pool invites them in because that is what they're doing is just that's discourse. What I did was a horror show. Meanwhile, so here it is. This is in a couple of parts. Number 10.
Right to the heart of this anti-Semite claim that's happening. This is something, if you read the definition, it says you can't claim that there's multiple people inside of banks or in media that are all Jewish or you're anti-Semitic. And that's the truth. Like, it's the truth. What are we talking about? And
Library, what do you mean? You mean?
I'm saying, like, I've been labeled anti-Semite, right? So there's different beliefs about our bloodlines, you know, like the documentary that Kyrie posted. And in general, America has been left ignorant and history has been changed. So when we start questioning things that question the indoctrination, then you immediately get, you know, you said debanked or what did you say happened to you? Or
demonetized, deplatformed.
Demonized, demonetized. And what's so beautiful about this time is everyone got to see what's really been happening. And now we can really understand. We can see that Ron Emanuel was right next to Obama, and then Jared Kushner was right next to Trump.
But so we're getting right into it, I guess, right? I was hoping to go for the news first before we got into all of this stuff. I think the issue is one way to put it is you're expounding upon a localization issue that you've witnessed, right? Let me clarify. There are a handful of people that you
Pause
see
it,
are
incidentally. Let me just say this about this conversation. And now look, I'm not a psychiatrist. I can't make a diagnosis, but I think there's one person who has talked about having severe mental and emotional issues. He's been rather public about that, and then there's another who's a complete and utter moron. And well, I don't know. You can guess and figure out who you think is who. But what Kanye seems to be saying is that we've had 2 presidents in a row that have Jewish advisors, and therefore it's unclear, what he's trying to say about that. Jews have been overrepresented. One as a chief of staff. That's what Rahm Emanuel was. Jared Kushner is just his daughter, his son-in-law.
Yeah, he wasn't because he was Jewish, because he was family.
Exactly.
It's just nepotism.
Exactly. But it's quite a coincidence, although chief of staff, just guy who goes out and leverages his position to get money from the Saudis, not exactly the same dynamic, but that was what he was trying to allude to. And then he's also bringing in what is known as the Black Israelite ideology. I don't know if these guys are everywhere, but I've seen them for decades. First back in Cambridge in Central Square, they would get on literally on a soapbox and espouse an argument that they were the true Israelites, ultimately Hebrews and ultimately Jews.
Chosen people.
And they had a very, specific ideology. I'm not quite sure. Certainly there's been, there are different theories about this, but I'm not sure how that plays in. And Kanye has not been exactly forthcoming on how that works in. But I just want to give you update. And then what Tim said was utter nonsense. I can't even make that out, but we can go back and listen to it again and then see.
But that was his response to Kanye basically saying, well, look at this. Look, the Jew, the puppet master sitting next to the president. And so now it's time for
I wanted to get to the news, not the Jews.
The funny part is that Tim will ultimately, and we'll play this clip because it's only fair, ultimately say that Kanye is sort of being anti-Semitic and he thinks that he's wrong, but he won't say it to his face. Mm-hmm. When he gives a little bit of pushback, Kanye will, well, you'll see.
Yeah. This is preceding that.
Okay.
I think the issue is, one way to put it, is you're expounding upon a localization issue that you've witnessed, right?
A localization issue.
Let me clarify. There are a handful of people that you see are Jewish in a certain place, and then you associate Judaism with the power, whereas I view that as not relevant to it. Like, yeah, you're substantially more powerful than I am, but I don't view what you're doing as an issue of black people.
Yeah, but have you ever heard the term the black vote? So it's okay to put us in one net, but it's not okay for me to put them in one net.
Yeah, but I mean,
that's the basis of the hypocrisy that people have been thinking about and knowing about and realizing for decades.
Pause it for 1 second. Pause it for 1 second. Okay, so understand what he's saying. You can say the black vote, but I can't say, and it's unclear what Kanye is saying because he hasn't quite said it. And then Milo Yiannopoulos, who you'll recall was formerly gay and now just has a roommate that used to be his husband or still his husband. I'm not quite sure.
That does his work around the house. I think he's kind of trolling.
And I'm not quite clear. Yiannopoulos seems to want to get in on this too. But understand, well, let's let it play out and we'll break this down.
I've been thinking about and knowing about and realizing for decades. We were all wondering how this dam was going to break. Everybody in the country was wondering, what is the root of this hypocrisy? Why can people talk about white people a certain way? Why can't they talk about that group a certain way? And the wretched and wicked and oppressive prevailing orthodoxy of cancel culture, well, it turned out that the one thing that was going to break the dam was the biggest star in the world. And it took the biggest star in the world to do it. And now the dam is broken.
So let me tell tell you my issue. I don't like identitarianism. You guys are familiar with what that is?
Well, they started it, and they've been visiting
Sure,
on
I-
us.
The-
We're
when
trying
I
to
was-
break it.
When I was asking you about running for president, you immediately said, well, you'd be good for the black vote. And I said, is that because I'm black? No, not because of that. So is that, are you doing the same thing?
I didn't say that was the only reason. I said it was because you're personable to the common person, and you probably would do well with the black vote. Absolutely.
Just because I'm black? Because a lot of black people don't like me.
Okay, can you pause it too? Like, I mean, that is Kanye. Actually, I'm surprised that he remembered that. Did any research on that? That's something that Tim Pool said. Because that's also really dumb and like pandering to black people.
Well, Tim Pool has no idea that he's a massive identitarian.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's Kanye kind of got him there because, like, I don't know that Kanye has some sort of like special in with the black community.
Well, first off, there's so much there's so many layers of ignorance associated with this. Identitarianism is a specific thing. I think he confuses identitarianism with identity politics. Mm-hmm. The identitarian movement, as far as I know, is a European white nationalist movement. So I think he must be using the term. He's conflating identitarianism with identity politics.
Right.
So let's just assume he doesn't mean white nationalism that like literally promotes the great replacement theory. Like you could say that maybe Tucker Carlson was an identitarian. But let's talk about identity politics. What was the first example of identity politics in this country? In other words, what was the first mass political movement based around the way that people identified themselves, presumably not involving class, although, maybe sometimes people don't identify themselves as class, but certainly we know that there is, at the very least, a theory that people vote based upon their class interests very much. Certainly the wealthy class does. But what is, if you look at our politics in this country, and you wanted to say what party, for instance, organizes around identity, you would have to look at the Republican Party, the fact that over 80% of the party is white. The overwhelming majority of people who vote Republican are white people. The Democratic Party, they lose a majority of the white vote. They win the majority of black vote. They win the majority of essentially of brown people vote. Not all brown people, and it depends on how, like what nationalities within that in terms of immigrants and in terms of like, but broadly speaking, it is a far less single identity that is represented in the party. And to say the black vote, of course you can say the black vote, because it just so happens that, and you can also say the Jewish vote, because blacks and Jews vote very similar to each other. Not necessarily, well, they happen to vote similarly to each other as well, but like Jews vote 75%, I think, for Democrats. Blacks vote something like high 80s, early 90s for Democrats. You can say the Jewish vote. You can say the black vote. That it doesn't mean that they all share certain characteristics.
It's a shorthand for electoral trends. It's not like a generalization about all people are this way or all Jews are controlling the media. It's a shorthand.
And also having a similar ideology or similar material interests is not the same as attributing certain characteristics that are essential to their being to them.
Yeah.
Just so that we could get that clear, because we're watching two people conflate like multiple things simultaneously.
Now we'll skip ahead.
All right,
All right, we're
skip ahead.
skipping a little bit. Yeah.
Well, let's go back just so you can say about the black vote, because it's also pretty funny because in fact, Tim Pool does traffic in identity politics.
Yeah, because also just the point I was trying to get at earlier is like if Tim Pool knew anything about Kanye's appeal, Kanye, as rappers go, has some of the whitest fans in music.
Without
Like, so Tim is engaging in exactly what he says he's not engaging in. He's assuming that Kanye's fans are black because he's black and he does rap music. And Kanye does have some black fans, but certainly as rappers go, some of the more whiter fan bases of them all.
Kanye was big in Fargo.
Kanye was big with.
It's quite possible that amongst amongst the black community, he may get more votes than, let's say, Donald Trump.
Or a standard Republican.
A standard Republican.
Right.
But he's not going to win the black vote.
And it is racist that people like Tim Pool think that there's a chance.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Like, yes, people tend to want to vote with people who they think have a similar or shared experience to them, okay, for whatever reason. Certainly in the Republican Party, they all vote for the white guy. And so, but I think like Kanye has shown consistently that he doesn't necessarily share the same political issues, ideologies, needs that most black people have.
Yeah, most black people weren't saying slavery was a choice. Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
I said it was because you're personable to the common person, and you probably would do well with the black vote. Absolutely.
Just because I'm black, because a lot of black people don't like me.
Oh, of course. I think race plays a role in a lot of things. Absolutely. And I think that
I think the construct of race has really been forced upon us as just something for us to be woke about and just constantly talk about and use it as these like walls.
But pause it for 1 second. Let me just give Kanye credit for part of what he said. The construct of race has been largely forced upon us. Not, however, so much for wokeness, but really so that certain people could be owned
and oppressed
created
for labor.
Second-class citizens and become a permanent underclass to the extent that possible. That's probably the reason. The wokeness might be a response to the centuries of that.
Yeah, it's downstream effect.
I'm just putting that out there.
But like crazy how he gets so close and then
So close.
the opposite conclusion.
So close.
Yeah.
Judaism.
Well, let's look at the facts of what I'm saying, though. If you say in this neighborhood where they gerrymander this amount of time, so hey, I wasn't doing that. I was just gerrymandering the lawyers and the Hollywood executives and the people at the bank that debanked me and then froze my accounts. You know, it's like we want to jump into protecting the idea that we can't put a net around something, right? But that's been my job as a producer to take, a Roy Ayers sample and put a James Brown drum and put it within a 2-minute, 3-minute song. That's the way I actually think, and that's the way I talk. And now this morning, I found out that they were trying to put me in prison because what they did was I moved $140 million into JP Morgan, and I said, I want to talk to Jamie Dimon. Like, look at me.
Pause
I'm
it
just
for 1 second. I you know what? I remember one time that Tim Pool once said, "You're personable. You're like you have the concerns of the average person." That just, I just remember that. Like, yeah, it is. To be fair, it is annoying when you move $140 million into JP Morgan and you can't get Jamie Dimon on the phone. It's like, hey, dude, what's it take to get a little service around here?
I'm not 100% sure on this because I don't like keep flashcards or whatever, but I don't think Jamie Dimon is even Jewish. I
Right.
think he's Greek.
Right.
If
Yes.
memory serves. So Felix Peterman said it.
Well, okay. Yes,
But he's probably got a Kushner next to him, if you know what I mean.
all right, let's continue. Are we continuing with that clip?
I moved to where he walks out.
Okay.
Bradley cut it up before that. So
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
This is where Kanye walks out.
down removing all of the, richest person, all of this, so I can serve him. And the more and more those things are taken away from me, the more I can be empty and be a vessel and be able to be used. And right now it's like, you're not going to take, if we can't, you're not going to take my pain away, right? The Jewish people say it's the Holocaust, this happened, and you can't say anything about it. We can't take their pain away. No one's going to denounce the fact that they tried to lock me up. That's what, because every time I'm just holding stride, and it's like, I thought I was more Malcolm X, but I find out I'm more MLK, because as I'm getting hosed down every day by the press and financially, I'm just standing there. And when I found out that they tried to put me in jail, it was like a dog was biting my arm, and I almost shed a tear, almost, but I still walked in stride through it. Yeah.
I think they've been extremely unfair to you.
Who was they though? We can't say they is,
corporate
can we?
press. I'm not using I don't use the word as the way I guess you guys use. I'm talking.
It is
about
them, though, isn't it? I mean, because
No.
because
Pause
when you
it
think
for 1
about it,
second. Pause it.
Nice to see you, little.
First off, I don't
fascist
know.
weasel.
I don't know. I'm not aware of who is trying to put him into prison
And debank him.
and debank him. I'm unclear about the prison thing, because I don't know who's talking about. But we should just say that's Nick Fuentes, who is the avowed anti-Semite. I mean, avowed, proclaimed anti-Semite, proclaimed misogynist, proclaimed homophobe. Interesting. And I'm not sure where he is on race. He's probably not going to
I mean, I think
his
he's a
horn
word.
too much on that at this moment. But we should say Fuentes is jumping in there. They want Tim Pool to say the Jews are trying to lock him up.
Say it. Say it.
In the I guess I don't know, like
In prison.
at the Jew club they meet and decide these things. But
Well, I mean, like, Kanye is not doing all right. I mean, he's conflating his personal financial struggles with like black people's generally and Jews. Like,
I mean, this all stems from him having a disagreement with basically a Jewish psychiatrist who
said he wanted him to take his meds.
And it's I'm not going to I'm not qualified to comment on that, but I think it's like there is something up with Kanye mentally, and it seems like he's become a vessel for a Nick Fuentes in Mayu Yiannopoulos. So
Yep.
like you can't argue with the results.
And also, let's be clear, he's also become a vessel for the right. I mean, as much as like Tim Pool is going to, tentatively push back on the conspiracy theory and the let's call it insanity that is being spewed by Kanye, he's also platforming him.
yeah.
In the same way that, Tucker Carlson has, and all of them are. This is all, even when there's this slight pushback, they are platforming him without any real critique.
Oh, he was hyping it up. Tim Pool was like, could not have been advertising this more.
And let's be clear, Kanye comes in and he's the headliner, but look at the other people on the marquee. I mean, he's not pushing back on Nick Fuentes. Okay, we're having a civil argument as to whether essentially Jews are vermin who control the world or not. We're just having a civil argument about it. This is not a topic of civil argument. This is not a topic of like, hey, you know what? Should we, increase the payroll tax by X amount of percentage? Is that going to lead towards, or should we raise the minimum wage or lower the minimum wage? Is that going to impact unemployment? Is it right what the Fed is doing? Or, are men different than women? What's their different love language? This is not the same type of argument. This isn't like, I like this emo band versus you like that emo band. Or what kind of skateboard trucks do you have? This is not the same level of argument. And Poole is trafficking in this because his audience he has built wants it, and this is the way that he gets his clout and all of it. He makes his money this way.
Yeah. And the white nationalists that are accompanying Kanye feel like they now have, at least for the moment, one, a wedge, and two, a temporary shield to have
Without
this
a doubt.
very famous black guy saying this kind of stuff.
I mean,
And you know where Milo Yiannopoulos has been in the past, since his like sort of coming out and saying that he didn't really have a problem with, where he was making the same argument that Matt Walsh was, basically that the age of consent is a silly way to determine whether sex is appropriate or not. You know where he's been? And of course, Matt Walsh will not get excommunicated in the way that Yiannopoulos does, because Yiannopoulos was at the time gay, supposedly was gay, I should say. Well, who cares? But he's been nowhere until he hitched his.
Those guys can't believe their luck.
Totally.
And can I just say something really quickly? I just feel like I think when Kanye says debanking and like that they're trying to lock him up, my guess is someone was trying to get him into a conservatorship. That's just my guess. I don't really know. And that's what was getting cut off. I could see that happening. But anyway.
All right, continue.
My arm, and I almost shed a tear, almost, but I still walked in stride through it. Yeah.
I think they've been extremely unfair to you.
Who was they though? We can't say who they is,
corporate
can we?
press. I'm not using I don't use the word as the way I guess you guys use. I'm talking.
It is
about
them, though, isn't it? I mean, because because when you think about it, consider it. In 2018.
What do you mean it's not?
What do I mean? Like, okay, so how about? Are you leaving?
Are you referring to the press?
He's gone. I'll say it right now. You guys want to bring that stuff up? And then
Have
think
the
we're not going
discussion.
to have a
Like,
conversation?
have the discussion.
Like you think he's going to come in here and say, here's my pain, here's my suffering. I'm going to say, I hear you. And then he's going to say, and it was Jewish people. And I'm going to be like, okay, but don't you consider, it's like, I'm not going to do this. I refuse.
Make sure he's cool.
All right, go for it. Luke and I will have a conversation. So I can't say I'm surprised.
Why not have a conversation with Fuentes?
What do I even do? Other than ask him, please elaborate on this. Are you referring to individuals, or are you quite literally blaming an entire group of people for the fact that powerful individuals are causing you harm?
I really wanted to ask Nick about his thoughts about MLK, because I know they contradict his.
He walked out too. They all walk out and join him.
Yeah. Okay. And what's interesting is you can see how mad Tim Pool is that he's lost his his guest, and he's not being. It's just. I mean, this is just so. It's disgusting. It's ridiculous. It is sad in some ways to watch a guy who clearly needs to be on medication being exploited in this way, but it is what it is. And
it's not to say like Kanye was a great guy before, when he's not engaging in this. This is just like a very extreme version of it. And Tim there, I saw him getting credit online from some people saying, well, later after all of these guys leave the room, he says, well, we can't group Jewish people
we
together.
have that.
Okay.
We have that. Here's Tim Pool. And to be fair, I guess, I think it's, all right, good for Tim Pool that he has decided to come out against obvious anti-Semitism, but
like his choice there was to say, "Oh yes, it is all the Jews who are doing all your banking stuff and psych med stuff." Like it's them,
right? And let's be clear though, Tim Pool is doing the basic minimum and has done so much more damage just in platforming Fuentes and making it seem like, I just wanted to have a reasonable conversation about your immense bigotry. Give me a break.
Yeah.
Give me a break. He is, let's be clear here, even if he's disagreeing, and even when he says here, credit that he's not himself personally espousing anti-Semitic views. Let's be clear. He is undergirding and promoting anti-Semitism and bigotry by saying it's a topic that can be sort of like nuanced and discussed in a rational podcast interview. He wasn't coming in here. He was so upset when Kanye left because he, in his own words, was being perfectly deferential to Kanye and was just examining his anti-Semitism and his bigotry. No, if you're going to have Kanye on there, it's incumbent upon you to be offensive enough to his views that he gets up and leaves.
But the reason that he knew he couldn't do that, and that's why you don't platform this shit, is because Kanye, that was the first time he's heard anything close to no in years. When he said just tepidly, Tim Pool just said, basically was like, well, I'm not going to say Jews equal media. I'm going to be a little bit more nuanced on it. And that's all it took for that guy to get up and leave. So that's the reason why you can't do this interview, because all you're doing is promoting anti-Semitism, because there's literally no way to engage in this conversation unless you're being entirely combative, but then they're not going to agree. That's the whole point.
Yes.
There's a reason that they felt like they could come to this space to have this, to make their bigoted claims.
Yeah. And they already...
And Tim only pushes back hard when they're out of the damn room.
Exactly. And let's be clear again, the idea that he would entertain the notion that this could be a civil conversation and be offended that somebody would walk out when he pushed back on it is in and of itself a promotion and an aggrandizement of anti-Semitism, to say that it's really a question of how specific you want to get. It's really a question of how nuanced it is.
Yeah.
So I would recommend Timba on Toast's video on Tim Pool Milk Toast Fence Sitter. This is a time where being a milk toast fence sitter, as Tim Pool likes to call himself, doesn't actually work.
Right. And now, once they're out of the building and he knows, like, okay, I've had my shot, now I can say something. Because and just in terms of like journalism, which Tim likes to pretend like he does, there couldn't be anything more corrupt and bankrupt than the idea of like, I'm only going to express my real thoughts after he walks out of the thing, when I realize like I've lost my access.
Brian says, Ye's point about the black vote versus the Jews and identitarianism was spot on. How do you reconcile that? I did, and I'll reconcile it again. The black vote is a handful of working class, poor, wealthy, basically every single individual, and the tendencies they have towards voting. When Kanye is talking about Jewish people, he's not talking about cultural identity, politics, conservatism, tendencies to vote liberal or otherwise. He's saying because there's a handful of powerful, wealthy people who happen to be Jewish, it is Jewish people who have it out for me. And I'm like, like my guy and my employee who are downstairs and are very Jewish, they actually like your music, they're fans, Jewish. They just don't like what you're saying about them. They don't have it out for you at all. That's the distinction. Why insult people who actually like you? Why make them your enemies because you've chosen to attack their identity instead of the argument?
Yeah.
That's very different. If you want to come out and say, Jewish people in New York vote this way, ain't nobody going to get mad at you. They're going to be like, that's true. They are very religious. They're conservative. They tend to vote these certain ways. If you're going to say that there are a lot of liberal Jewish people in New York that tend to vote this way, yeah, that's called the demographic. We do that all the time.
He really doesn't understand any of this stuff. I mean, I guess, because he has some very Jewish friends, he knows that it's not right to criticize people for being Jewish because they like your music. And I suppose that's his way of saying don't be anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
But he doesn't really seem to have a full grasp on it, on the idea. He's really just giving advice to Kanye, like, hey, man, this is strategic advice. Why are you alienating these people? That's not the problem.
With anti-Semitism?
It's not the problem with any type of like bigotry based upon, a racial or ethnic background. Or religious background, for that matter, or sexual orientation, or the way one identifies oneself. It has to do with the ideas of reducing people down to some essential characteristic that is in the cases of these bigots, somehow antisocial. Some characteristic, like, they all aspire for power. They all are money grubbing. They all are lazy. They all are, super smart at math. It's an essential character. I mean, there are reasons why, and I there may be, I don't know that this is actually the case. And it turns out Jamie Dimon, he's married to someone who's Jewish, which is pretty close.
That's how she controls him.
Yeah, that's like she's pulling the strings. But there's, like traditionally, there were a lot of Jews in banking, in part because Jews couldn't bank through systems because they were kept out of like the traditional forms of transferring money. I'm going back hundreds of years ago in Europe. Catholicism didn't allow for lending, and so Jews were situated to being able to loan money. Because Jews were in the diaspora, they also were able to transfer money through systems like we see today in like Arab communities and Afghani communities where people send money through like almost like pre-technological wiring systems. From an entertainment perspective, like I don't think it's there have been eras where there's been a lot more Jews who were in comedy proportionate with the rest of the population, but a part of that was like a function of there were quotas, certain jobs that you couldn't get hired for in those years.
And certain industries were looked down upon by other people. Like it's actually a similar reason why there's a lot of black people in hip hop, for instance.
Exactly.
Yeah,
like
you find these spaces.
You were not held in high regard if you were a comedian in the 1950s, let's say.
The elites.
Exactly.
You might actually get put in jail for saying what you wanted to say.
Exactly. And there were also sort of like there were specific like Jewish resorts in, let's say, the Catskills, in part because if you were Jewish, you couldn't go to other resorts. Certainly, like there were Jewish country clubs because you weren't allowed to go into other country clubs. There were, these type of things. Like these things are not genetically coded, but they are, in many respects, cultural things that have been adopted because of restrictions that have taken place, because of opportunities that were limited or granted, because society had functioned in a certain way. And, this stuff is not easy to walk through, but it is also why when you have somebody who is an avowed bigot, you don't have these type of nuanced conversations with them because these issues are nuanced. And their position is essentialist, and their position is not in any way nuanced. And when you start to invite those people who hold these like fundamental positions, blacks are this way, Jews are that way. When you start to entertain and have nuanced conversations with people who have these fundamental, what you're doing is you're beginning to normalize these beliefs. That's why it's like so problematic when people like Sam Harris invited race essentialists on to his show to argue like what's really going on with IQ.
And what do you think the audience
That's what makes
takes
it
away
so dangerous
from it? Because I'm reading through Tim Pool's comments right now. Do you want to guess who they side against? His viewers?
Of course.
I mean, Ye has so much to say. It sucks he couldn't stay. He's just on another level financially to see things Tim can't. It's great Milo can actually stick up for him.
The normal people.
Tim dropped the ball in a potentially groundbreaking discussion. This feels like a missed opportunity. Never seen someone drop the ball as hard as
These
Tim
are all
did.
anti-Semites. Like,
Tim, your show has grown from the guests you have on. Don't forget that.
That's fair.
sorry.
Remember, yeah, the show has grown. Like Gavin McInnes, like Nick Fuentes, like the other Proud Boys guys. That's where the show has grown.